Hello and welcome guys. Today I am going to start with something entirely new. So far those who have subscribed to my channel and playlist are used to my solving problems with Visual Studio, ASP.NET Core and Web API 2 and C# console application. But today I'm going to start on an exercise that was asked by one of my students who comes privately to study PHP, and that was about a solution to a problem wherein some student number is input in a query string and the student marks are fed into the same query string, and then the task that I am going to solve is to calculate the average of those student marks as well as to find the minimum, maximum and the standard deviation of those marks. So watch out. Okay, so I have got the Visual Studio for Code in front of me, and I am using XAMPP as an open source server, and the installation of it has been done as per the manual, and you can watch many videos on that already existent on the YouTube. So I'll start straight away with coding. So $PHP, that's the PHP code that signals the PHP code. And here also you'll find that PHP is the language selected mode already there. And then $query is $_server. These are the built-in stuff within PHP, and I will tell you in a second what this does. Query underscore string within single quotes. Now what this does is to fetch the query string from the server, from the browser, and assigns it to a variable $query or query. And $int equals an array, empty array to start with. So what I said to do is to get the query string and use the built-in explode function in PHP with an array map to make an array with n number of elements out of that string, which is comma separated basically. So I'm going to write the first function set input, and I'll pass the parameter $query, and I'll declare a global $int because I'm going to make $int as an array with an array map function. So $int equals, that's also a built-in function, array underscore map, and within the function we can see it's a callable callback and an array. So that callable callback is int val. If the string looks like an integer, just like the marks, then separate it explode function. It takes a delimiter and a string. So my delimiter is a comma, and then pass on the string $query. That's it. So my set input function is already set, and then I'll write the next function, averaging function. So function averaging, and pass on the same $int, that's the array out of the split string. So I'll declare a global variable $average. I'll tell you in a moment why it is declared as global. The reason is to be able to use it in another function without having to call this averaging function all over again. $sum equals 0, and then I will declare a local variable counter, which is the size of the array, size of $int. Right. Now the first element is the number of students, so ignore it and start from the second element, which is the student mark, because we are actually stripping the string and splitting it at the comma to an appropriate array. We are following the elements of the array out of the query string, so we'll have to ignore the first element, which is the number of students, and it is not the mark which we are concerned with. So for that, we'll make a for loop for iteration in which the local variable is, I have chosen $I equals 1 because the 0th index of that array is ignored, it's not taken, or the first element is ignored. I'll start from the second element, which is basically the first index, as it is a 0-base array. So $I equals 1, $I less than $counter, which is the size of the array, then $I plus plus, $I plus plus, and within the curly braces I'll have to write $sum, which is the accumulator which keeps on accumulating the sum of the array elements. So $sum plus equals $int, the ith element of $int, so $I. Semicolon, and then outside the for loop, $average equals, there's a global variable $average equals $sum divided by size of the integer minus 1. So basically it could be $counter minus 1, but I have kept it as size of integer minus size of $integer minus 1. So within bracket size of $integer minus 1, and then the echo statement, echo the average is how do we get the average? So this echo statement is smart enough to look for any variable and then concatenate, put a break to break into the new line. So the dot is the concatenation of two strings and then followed by a semicolon. And then this average needs to be returned to another function for calculation of the final standard deviation. Return $average and then I'll have to write the function for getting the minimum value. Function get minimum, and I'll pass on the array once again, array of marks. So here I'm assuming that the maximum marks is 100, and so I set a variable $min equals 100 because I will start from the maximum of marks and then compare this 100 marks, which is stored in the minimum variable, with the incoming array element and compare it in a if statement, and if the array element found is less than the minimum, then the minimum takes the value of the array element, right? So I will just copy the statement and the for loop from upstairs, and then what I will do is my for loop iteration is the same, and here I'll have to put an if statement. I'll get rid of this $sum. So what does the if statement say? So if $int and $i, that is the ith element, which is this, $int $i less than, if the incoming array element, which is one of the marks, is less than the minimum, then the minimum value, which was earlier 100 over here, it will assume the value of the array. So $min is equal to $int and $i. Okay, and then outside the for loop, I've already have my for done. Give it a bit of indenting. Say, then I will echo the minimum mark is $min, because that's what the output should look like. The minimum mark is the space $min, and then again for clarity I'll put a break over here and then terminate this code with this semicolon, and then terminate this function. Save it. So I've got the averaging and I've got the minimum function, and then I will write a get max function, which will be very similar to the get minimum. So I will just copy my code from here. So I'll copy the code from get minimum and change it accordingly. Sorry, what happened? Control V. So make it get maximum. Passing in the integer, and here I will store the maximum value in $max. And contrary to the getting the minimum, where I started with the maximum value and then compared with each element of the array, and whichever element was less than the minimum value, assume that value array element value. Here I will do the opposite. I will start with the maximum value as 0, and within that iterative loop, if dollar $int $i greater than max, greater than $max, that is $max, you can guess it, is equal to, it takes the value of, sorry, here it will be greater sign. So if the incoming array element, that is the one of the mark, is greater than the maximum, so then the maximum takes the value of the array element. Okay, it goes on, and at the end of the for loop, outside the for loop, I'll write the maximum mark is $max, and then break, and then I'll have to call these functions. Let me run a quick check before I move further to calculate the standard deviation. I'll call this set input and pass it the query string $query. I'll call the averaging, pass it $int, the array, and then get minimum, pass in the int array, and then finally the get maximum, and again pass in the int array, and try so the average is 52.5, undefined variable, the minimum mark is 100, the maximum mark is 0. Why it is saying like that? Let's see. Something is missing here. Ah, dollar counter. I have missed the dollar counter over there. Right. So dollar counter, I'll just copy code from up size of, and then dollar counter here, and dollar counter there, save it, run it. Yeah, so average is 52.5, minimum max is 50, and maximum mark is 56. That's fine. So we are getting there. Right. So all we are left with is to get a standard deviation. Just bear with me for a second. So I'll write the last function, standard deviation function, get standard deviation. Here I need to pass the average value as well, because it needs in its calculation the mean or the average value of these numbers. So that's the template. Now I will have to declare a variable to store standard deviation. So declare a variable to store short SD. So that variable is dollar standard deviation equals 0.00. Just to make it to the correct casting of a float type, dollar standard deviation is 0.00. Dollar counter, again let's not forget it, is equal to size of dollar int. Probably I could have declared dollar counter as a global variable and pass it on to the different functions rather than declaring it everywhere as a local variable, but that's fine. So dollar result is the variable to store the standard deviation. Starts with 0.00 again. Now we have a for loop here similar to what we have got up here or even up here. So I have to iterate again for dollar I equals 1, ignoring the first element, which is the number of students. Dollar I less than dollar counter, because we have got zero base index for the array. So the size of the array minus 1. So dollar counter and then dollar I plus plus, and then within the curly braces the for loop. So what is the result? Result, actually it accumulates. Now I will tell you the formula in a second that I am using to calculate the standard deviation. Dollar int pow function is for square rooting actually. Dollar I, an exponent, that is the base, and that is the exponent, is 2, squaring. This minus just get rid of this. Okay, so minus again power function. Now this time average has to be, mean has to be squared. So dollar average to the power 2 exponent, and closing bracket semicolon, and the final result or the final standard deviation will be dollar result equals, that is the square root built-in function sqrt, and within the square root this dollar result divided by dollar counter minus 1, ignoring the first element again. So this, and finally we've got an echo statement. The standard deviation is echo standard deviation is dollar result, that is the standard deviation, or I didn't use the standard deviation at all, so I don't need that one actually. So dollar result and then break to the new line. That's it. If everything is alright, it should work now. Oh, sorry, I forgot something. I needed to call this function get maximum and then get standard deviation. So get standard deviation, passing in two parameters, that integer array and $average. That's it. Finally, go to the localhost. Okay, the standard deviation is this. So let me tell you what formula did I use for the standard deviation. Now, standard deviation formula is, I will just get back to you in a second. Just hang on. I will just copy this part where it gives me the standard deviation. So this is the standard deviation. Thanks for watching. This is the standard deviation.